there, I'm Nick! Aaron was busy doing stuff, so he brought me on to do Hibby game reviews for games built with Unity. Our first subject is Poi, a 3D platformer assembled by Polykid out of San Francisco. Poi is a cheery throwback to another era, when the first 3D games were emerging from the primordial 2D ooze and forming into, by and large, platformers. Playing this, it's hard not to feel nostalgic for Mario's colorful and freewheeling 3D adventures, but not so much your Galaxies or your Sunshines, but your 64s. Where Poi lacks some mechanics, it more than makes up for in sheer quantity of content and showmanship. Poi's story revolves around a pair of orphans setting out into the wild world to explore and have adventures, aided immediately by an old man with an airship who will help you get there. You can switch between the boy and girl at will, it won't hurt or harm your gameplay, in pursuit of explorer medallions which function much like the stars of a Mario game. You'll run through each of the game's half-dozen zones several times in a variety of redresses and objectives to bump up your medallion count, which unlocks other special modes that grant you more medallions and so on. Now when games like this were in vogue in the late 90s, I was commanding and conquering on the PC, but I still have a small amount of nostalgia for a game like Poi. What blew my mind from the first menu is how well produced the game is. Despite being the product of two indie developers, there's an incredible amount of polish here. The cute and bright art direction is distinct, the characters are well drawn and move well, and while the detail is a little sparse, what matters most is that the platforming layouts rarely feel cheaply difficult. Each uniquely themed section is distinct and memorable, which helps considering you'll be back for seconds, thirds, and fourths, and more. Even as you're unlocking new landscapes, jumping on snails and bucket heads, and defeating bosses, the story isn't compelling on its own to pull you through the game. Instead, Poi makes a metagame out of filling its sky-based hub world with a gallery of partner airships and hangers-on that deliver a variety of gameplay challenges. Want to go to the moon and collect keys? Want to practice your fast platforming abilities? Want to chase slippery penguins? Well, this is the game for you. Again, the sheer quantity of content Poi offers is so vast and unlocks so quickly that before you can even ponder the incoherence of the offerings, there's already more for you to do. That Sky Hub does eventually get crowded with stuff though. Coins collected in the levels allow you to purchase new costumes and tools. Those tools allow you to seek out objectives, dig up collectible fossils, Animal Crossing style, and complete bespoke objectives like looking at the moon. Yes, you too can look at the moon. With even the slightest bit of persistence, you can unlock all these tools early on, although it's easy to forget you have them since they can only be used one at a time. The compass tool, for instance, would be substantially more useful if it was persistent. The shovel tool would be a bit less irritating if you didn't have to equip it when approaching context-sensitive dig sites. Poi banks very heavily on the idea that simple 3D platforming is still enticing in 2017, and they're hardly the only ones. Playtonic, formed largely of Rare veterans, responsible for Nintendo's Banjo-Kazooie games, struck crowdfunding gold with the similarly themed ukulele for modern platforms. But retro design philosophy cuts both ways. It allows developer Polykid to build off a stable set of mechanics so they can experiment with platforming that works for the most part. On the flip side, Poi adopts all of the flaws that jumping in 3D space has always had. Misjudging distances with poor camera placement and falling off high ledges you've spent a chunk of time climbing is as frustrating as it's ever been. The game doesn't have many rough moments, but the platforming action is where you'll probably get the most frustrated. Similarly, the game's boss battles aren't quite as polished as they need to be, and the medallion objectives can be ambiguous. Still, Poi makes the best of what it borrows while polishing and building on it in a huge way. It's easy to glance at Poi on the Steam front and render a quick verdict. The game boldly goes, unafraid of your judgment, because it knows exactly what it wants to do. It's 20 years too late to sit on a shelf next to PlayStation CDs or Nintendo 64 cartridges, but Polykid uses its indie status as an advantage to experiment with anachronism. Rarely has a game worked so hard to please me while surprising me with new ideas before I got bored with the last ones. If you're not into bright 3D platforming starring orphan children, I can't blame you, but give Poi a shot and you'll find plenty of magic.